Let's talk.
Charles Brown.
Cryptic. Books can change the world. They can influence, entertain, transport, and enlighten. But across the centuries, authors have disguised their work with codes and ciphers, secret scripts, and magic signs. Cryptic is an absorbing history of Europe's 9 most puzzling texts, including the biggest one of all. Delighted to say that I'm joined by the man who hopefully is going to shed a light on the parchment, something like roll or parchment that we find. The author of Garry Shaw, of Cryptic, Garry Shaw. Morning to you, Garry.
Morning. It's fabulous to be on the show. Thanks for inviting me.
So, where are you in some sort of dusky vault somewhere? You know, holding a lantern up and blowing the dust off, like Indiana Jones and the Temple of the encrypted works or whatever.
Well, because the listeners can't hear me, I'm going to say yes. But in reality, I'm actually in a very nice office in France.
So have people always wanted to disguise, to hide in plain sight, or just basically to sort of do the Telegraph 3 down, rhymes with whatever?
The manuscripts I look at go back into the early modern phase, medieval, the European. So I cover about a 600-year period of time, roughly from the 1150s to about 1600, 1700. So, certainly during that period, people were very interested in creating cryptic writings, and this covers the ideas of secret writing, ciphers, codes, invented languages and alphabets. So all of these different ways that people could be creative in the ways that they hid information or wrote information down.
So you say, you're there in the early modern period, so that's what, can we say it's like late, just the tail end of the late Middle Ages? And the reason I'm saying that is because obviously we go from the only people being able to write scripts in Latin or, do text are sort of your monks and your scholars, but then education becomes a little more available for everybody, and we move towards the Renaissance and then Enlightenment. So ordinary people are having more of a chance of actually writing stuff without being condemned as heretical, for example.
Sure, yeah. The period I cover does cover that, all of that. So from monks writing all the way through to the printing press being invented, and then printed books becoming more available and easily affordable. But I'm focusing more on handwritten materials, so things that people produce by hand. And as I say, I go up into the 17th century and I cut off round about, I guess, 1700s-ish. So I try to cover about a 600-year phase.
Right then. Now we've got some great names, because the thing I love about this period, sort of late Middle Ages, is you have some wonderful. Charles the Fat, Philip the Bald, etc. But we've got and I also like a good religious, because the religious orders get thrown into there. So should we kick off with is it Hildegard of Bingen? Which now explain who this Ravenhead temptress was then, please, Garry.
So Hildegard is actually one of the more famous, I think, people I discuss in the book. She's best known today because of her music. She was a composer. She wrote works of she wrote down her visions. She experienced visions from a young age, believing that she was communicating or hearing the voice of God. Right. And so this is what led to her becoming famous. In fact, she was a woman who ran her own convent. She wrote letters to popes and influenced archbishops. So for her time, the 12th century in Germany, she was a very influential woman with a lot of power. So as I say, she mainly wrote down her visions because she was experiencing these, she believed, from God, and this is what people wanted to hear about. She performed her music. She investigated the natural world, wrote books about the cosmos and the earth and the animals. But in the 1150s, she did this weird thing where she suddenly invented her own language and her own script, so her own way of writing down things. And this has been a long-term mystery, really. It's one of her little-known inventions. As I say, she's quite famous, but this isn't really, because we don't know much about it. There's only a few surviving pieces of evidence for it. There's a list of nouns in her invented language. There's about 11,011 of these. And this is all recorded mainly in just 2 surviving manuscripts.
And are they? What I know this might sound silly, because a lot of the last one we'll come on to, the biggie, isn't in any language whatsoever. But presumably the lingua franca is going to be Latin or Greek.
And Latin mainly.
Latin
this time.
Yeah. So that's the thing. So Are they disguising these? Are we talking codes then? And why are they taken more seriously than somebody who said, I was out on the top field the other day and a cowpat spoke to me and I wish to be known as, Swain of Jerusalem or something like that. So is it because they are already of good standing in the societies that people take these writings, these visions, these manuscripts perhaps better than they would do if it was just some, like I said, some guy in the top field?
Well, Hildegard did spend 20 years in confinement as a nun. She was an anchoress for much of her life. Right. So there's a religious recluse. So she was very much invested in the church and its ways and the teachings. But it was just that these visions, she was very good at explaining stuff, very good at communicating. She wrote in Latin so that people, I guess the clergy, the higher level people could understand what her writings were so they could spread. And it basically came to the attention of the Pope, and the Pope was impressed by what she was saying. So this is how she kind of became famous. But as far as her kind of created writing goes, why she was doing that, why people were intrigued in this and how she was using it are all still debated, discussed, because, as I say, we don't have much evidence. She produced all these words. People have tried to explain it as maybe she was receiving, in her mind, the language of God. So the language of creation, the one used by Adam to name all things at the beginning of time. And maybe this is what she was pronouncing. Or maybe it was something more like a type of secret communication between her and her nuns so that people from the outside wouldn't understand what they were talking about if they happen to be overhearing conversations. But the words are all sorts of things, right? You go from the cosmic level, like angel, which is agans in her language, all the way through to things like foot, which is fuskal, or beer mug, which is gungalis. So, there's
Sorry, what's that? Beer mug is what?
Beer mug is the word gungalis. In Hildegard's language. So,
bring me my ale in the finest gungalis. I think I'm going to use that one.
Yeah, do it. But I mean, we only have one example of her using this in practice that survived. Yeah. And this is used in one of her songs for the consecration of a church. So she was peppering this song that she wrote with these invented words. And again, why is she doing this? We know that other writers might use Greek in places like this to show off their learning, but Hildegard didn't know Greek. Yep. So it probably highlights her own special connection to the divine, her special stamp even of her authority, and I guess made people, it was these words that people believed were coming from God through Hildegard. So it gave these songs extra power, you could say.
But you've got to be careful if you claim you've got a direct, if you've got, God's mobile, on your friends list, sure. if you like, because whilst you are, you're saying you've got the words of you've got the words of the Almighty or this and that. But you're dealing with the Pope, and we're not talking 21st century, friendly, happy, clappy Pope. I mean, the popes in the period we're talking about, more often than not, could get. I mean, we're not talking as bad as what is misinformedly named as the Dark Ages, say from sort of 400 to 900. But at the same time, you upset a Pope or you upset the Church, and you, at the very least, you're going to get a quick dose of excommunication, aren't you? If not worse.
Well, surprisingly, Hildegard was extremely critical of the Pope and the church, the clergy, the archbishops. She wrote letters to the Pope, so Pope Anastasius III at the time, in which she actually mentions her invented language and script. It's one of I think it is the first time we hear about it. Yeah. And she's incredibly, she tells off the Pope for letting the church become lax, for people losing their ways, how he has to get a grip on this situation and, improve the quality of the church and people's behavior. She writes to monks, doing the same sort of thing, telling them, there's the monks of Zweifelten in Germany, she writes a letter to them and tells them all off, basically, for losing their way as well. And interestingly, this is one of the spaces where she uses her unknown letters, her invented script.
Okay.
And she uses it to disguise the name of the recipient of the letter, so the monks of Zweifelten. And so it's, again, maybe this is a way here for her to make sure that, because she's been critical of the monks, people who might intercept the letter along the way during its delivery wouldn't be able to understand who it was aimed at. So it could be a simple cryptological method here.
Fascinating. And what about, I mean, because again, we're moving to that part, Renaissance, and then, then we get Enlightenment, and Reformation, that sort of thing. But if there are new ideas coming in from the world, or new ideas are being rediscovered, from Damascus, because I'm based in southern Spain, so we've got, the Caliphate, Cordoba, etc. So these ideas that people are saying in science, in medicine, in astronomy, could be seen as heretical amongst perhaps more the more conservative, hard-lined. So are they disguising their findings so that they don't be seen as, there be dragons and, she, in the best Monty Python way, she's a witch burner sort of stuff?
I mean, not in the case of Hildegard, I'd say. I don't think there's any evidence of her doing that. Later on, sure, there are cases of this that seem to be influenced by the need to hide for secrecy purposes, to kind of, you find this sometimes in medical writings, in particular, where, people might be wanting to hide certain topics that might have been taboo, so that might get them in trouble, I suppose, if someone was very, very much into searching for heretics because of the practices they were using. But on the whole, we find that people are often hiding these things, particularly like medical recipes, mainly because they don't want it to fall into untrained hands. And so people might encipher this type of writing just because they might think people might hurt themselves if they do this. But one of the fascinating things about those people, so let's say now we're entering the sort of, let's say, 1400s, 1500s, etc. People who are writing in engineering, people who are writing in sciences, yes, secrecy could be one aspect of the reason that they're writing in ciphers. But I found when I was researching the book that actually it's much more nuanced than that. And in fact, often in the case with a mysterious manuscript, it's that secrecy is one level, but on the other hand, it's often used to bring attention to yourself, the opposite of secrecy. You see it as a sort of performance of secrecy.
Sort of, look at me, I'm writing in code, aha.
Yes, exactly, yeah. So I give an example in one of my chapters of a man called Giovanni Fontana, a not very famous guy from Italy.
Great name, though. I mean, with,
absolutely. And yeah, he wrote a book on the instruments of war, and he wrote it all in a cipher of his own creation, which is basically lots of circles with squiggly lines coming off it. That looks quite impressive. And so his book is full of, there's military inventions there, so like an amphibious galleon that can go on land and water, and a self-reloading fortress, or a massive cannon to destabilize waters. But he also liked scaring people, so he created mechanical witches that breathe fire, and magic lanterns to scare people with projected images. But in this manuscript, he wrote most of the text in cipher. And it's really simple. Ciphers of this period, this is the 1420s in Italy. Ciphers of this time are really straightforward, simple substitution. Effectively, one letter in the alphabet is one symbol in the cipher. And so you just switch them. Easy to break if you put a little bit of effort in. And now the thing here is that it seems to be that, Fontana was a bit of a showman, a bit of a trickster. He seems to have been a pretty fun guy. He's the main person in my book if I could go out for a pint with. I'd want to go out with Giovanni Fontana and chat about all of this.
In your Google, having a Google yes, indeed, yeah.
That's true, exactly. And so for Fontana, it seems to be doing this. He's writing in cipher. Yeah, it shows off his knowledge. This was a time when ciphers were becoming more popular among the elite. People were experimenting with this for diplomacy and intelligence gathering. So it shows off his knowledge, his ingenuity. It also shows off his creativity and his, he's playing a game almost with the reader. He's challenging you to decipher it. He wants you to engage with him on this level through the manuscript. So he's a bit of a trickster. He likes to dress up his inventions as witches and things like this. He's also dressing his writing to make it more appealing. And so, again, this idea of secrecy bringing attention to itself is very clear, I think, in the case of Fontana especially.
I mean, perhaps should we address the £400 gorilla in the room collecting a copy of an international bestseller? We're talking Da Vinci Code, because Da Vinci didn't he?
Okay.
Da Vinci wrote in code, didn't he? And then the whole thing like that. So, I mean,
mirror writing mainly, yeah.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, are we going down the path of secret societies and black magic and truth which only the certain few should know? I mean, I'm not going to go down the Freemasonry path, but you see what I'm saying with here.
Sure.
The Illuminati are, as I speak, sort of somewhere in Zurich. The Illuminati have just stirred because I mentioned their name.
I mean, for surprisingly, for much of the manuscripts I'm looking at, it's only in the later periods that you start getting more of this kind of secret society use of ciphers and things like this, where you do get people like the Freemasons or the Rosicrucians writing material in symbols and codes like this. So I do mention this in the book, but it surprised me that it came kind of later in history, kind of more later in the early early modern, 1600s, 1700s is where you get these unusual societies that are hiding their secrets. So the oculists from Germany who were obsessed with eyes, for example, and lots of the rituals involve kind of plucking eyebrows and eyelashes and things like this as part of their initiation rituals.
Your basic night out of getting ready for Marbella, basically, but there you go.
All right. Sure. Okay, sounds good. But what was interesting to me there is also there's a lot of similarity between secret societies in this time and early scientific societies, because scientists too were also using ciphers to hide some of the secrets at this time. Galileo, for example, used writing in code to hide some of his inventions, and this was often to hide his discoveries. Yeah. And this was mainly so that if somebody else, you do this at the early stage, you make sure someone had published this, it was out there to decode if you needed it to be decoded, and it would give you more time to work on your research. And if someone else discovered this in the meantime, you could say, no, I discovered it first. You can see it's published in this code or kept by the head of the society in this code. You decipher it. Look, I discovered this before you. So, yeah, it's an interesting way of using ciphers. Yes, certainly.
I suppose. Yeah, now, just quickly, Philosopher's. God, it's too early in the morning for me. Philosopher's Stone. Yes. Again, all the Harry Potters will now have picked up their ears, as well as the Illuminati, etc. So, what was the Philosopher's Stone? Oh,
Well, the Philosopher's Stone is different things, but I mean, mainly it's seen as this material that you produce through a series of actions through alchemical experiments that allows you to produce vast quantities of gold. And at its simplest level, the transmutation, the transformation of basically anything cheap into gold. And so a lot of people were searching for this. It was also seen as a way, like philosophically, as purifying the soul. So there was a sort of religious element to it. But there was also an element of the Philosopher's Stone. Some people saw it as the ultimate cure for illness as well, that it had a medicinal purpose. And so you also had doctors working as alchemists or working in alchemy on the spare time, trying to solve the mysteries of like prolonging life or trying to cure all illnesses through the same medicine.
Right.
And so, one of the people I write about in the book is an alchemist called Michael Meyer, a German guy. I characterize him as unlucky because he spent his entire life experimenting, trying to get patrons. He wanted, this rich patron to support his work. And he wrote books, wrote. He was very obsessed with mythology, ancient mythology, and how this could be used to be decoded. He believed that myths were full of codes that explained alchemical reactions. Yeah. And so basically, if you could understand the ancient myth, it would give you the secrets to the Philosopher's Stone. And so this is what he spent his life trying to achieve. Unfortunately, he died reasonably young and never achieved it, sadly.
Now, in other stuff that you've done, because I've actually done some research for once in my life, but one of your things is archaeology and Egyptology, of course. That's one of your... And so you must, because hieroglyphics, and I tried, Garry, reading a book on how to decipher hieroglyphics, and it gets me to sleep very quickly indeed. But are we at a period where people are? I mean, okay, it's never really gone away, but you have the Assyrians with their tablets, you have the Egyptian knowledge. Do you detect the use of or the influence of either the pharaohs in some of these ciphers, or am I just transporting one link to the other here?
I don't think there's any real direct connection, I'd say. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news. However, I will say that people at this time were very, very fascinated by trying to track down the original language of creation. I mentioned this in relation to Hildegard. Yeah. And so people were looking at languages and experimented with languages, trying to find universal or, perfect languages, inventing different scripts. And part of their inspiration there was searching for the original language. And hieroglyphics was kind of a step on the way to this. So people were interested in trying to decipher hieroglyphs at this point as a step towards what they believed was the language of God.
But sir, just a question here from me in the back, sir. Surely, if you know your Greek mythology, if you look at a Greek god, you just explode. And if you hear the voice of the divine, again, spoiler alert, you explode. So why are you trying to find the voice of God or the language of creation? Because surely, boom, I found the language of God, and this is what it sounds like. Kapow, would basically.
Yeah, I suppose so. But I mean, as far as the research I was doing, nobody seemed too concerned about this. Maybe they should have been.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, I talk about John Dee, for example.
Yeah.
Famous Elizabethan polymath, best known as the astrologer for Queen Elizabeth I. And he was obsessed with this, trying to find the language of God, trying to understand creation through speaking with angels, as he believed, connection with the divine. And he didn't explode, but he did receive, he believed, the language of the angels and the script of the angels. And he was doing this because many people like him at the time believed that the apocalypse was coming.
Yeah.
And so he wanted to use this knowledge to guide people, to better understand how people should behave, because he felt that he'd reached the limits of what could be achieved with the technology of his time, with his understanding of mathematics, etc. And so the only way that he could get to best grip with this problem was using a scryer, so a person who could communicate with the supernatural. And he would speak with the scryer who believed he was connecting with angels, and Dee would write down in his angel diaries every day that he was doing this, every detail of these experiences. And as I say, the whole point here was, one, to understand the language of creation, but also to kind of help everybody. He was doing this, as he believed, as a sort of way to be a messenger to the Queen, to other people in England, to help guide them. And then also on the continent too, when he went to live in Prague as well.
So tell me a little bit then about the biggie, because this is the one
Sure.
that gets people scratching their heads, because there are it's the Voynich. Am I saying that correctly?
Sure. I mean, Voynich is probably more correct, but most people call it Voynich these days.
Okay. Well, the Voynich then. And
Sure.
what is the Voynich manuscript, and why is it hold such an appeal when
Sure.
there are sort of hundreds and thousands of cryptic writings out there?
Yeah, you're right. So the Voynich manuscript is famously the most mysterious manuscript in the world, which is great title for it. And yeah, it's unusual because when you're flicking through it, you come across these clearly themed sections. There's a section dedicated to plants, which we call the herbal section, which goes on for pages and pages and pages. Big pictures of plants, and with a specific emphasis on their roots. There's a sections on astronomy, astrology, cosmology. There's a whole section on bathing, where you just see naked women in these blue and green pools.
Well, after all the plants, so you need something to wake the reader up there.
Sure. And then there's a pharmaceutical section which looks about making concoctions for recipes, and then another section which is introduced by stars, also called recipes. Now, this is unusual in itself, but when you look at it more closely, all of the writing there is completely unreadable. It's a unique script, and people have interpreted it in different ways. Why can't we read this? What's going on here? And, there's only a few real explanations where it could be. It's either a cipher or a code, or an invented language and script, or maybe a hoax of some kind of medieval hoax. And so it's basically gibberish. People have been studying this for centuries. I mean, it was known in the past, but the modern rediscovery of it happened in 1912 by Wilfred Voynich in Italy. And this is when it became famous. And so for a long time, for much of that since 1912, when this modern era of research, people didn't know, where it came from, when it was made. And so the theories about trying to explain it and decipher it are all over the place. People I just spoke about John Dee. Some people thought John Dee created it as a hoax to make money out of Emperor Rudolf II in Prague. Some people thought it was the 13th century friar Roger Bacon who'd made it. And so all these ideas were all over the place. We're lucky these days that we have technology that helps us gain better insights into it. So, for example, in 2009, radiocarbon dating allowed us finally to give it a more specific date of creation, which places it in the early 15th century, which helps narrow down the possibilities for what it could be.
I also like the fact that it's run by it is in the library of Rudolf the Second Holy Roman Empire, and we do like our Holy Roman Empires, etc. And then they disappear, don't they? They disappear for ages and they pop up again. And you kind of wonder where they've been. I mean, to the casual eye, if you look, you're thinking, okay, so that's where J.R.R. Tolkien got Elvish from, basically.
Tolkien, of course, a famous inventor of languages himself and scripts. So, yeah, definitely. You see these inventions of scripts and languages all over the place in fiction, movies. Mysterious manuscripts are always very important in movies because they're always dangerous, full of world-ending power as grimoires and all of this. But, there's all sorts of theories been sprung up around the Voynich manuscript and where it could be and where it isn't. But as I say, this new data, so people, as I say, now have a closer date range for it. Beforehand, we didn't. And people are very great scholars have been looking at it, of studying the illustrations, and all of the indications in the illustrations, the little clues you get, really suggest that it's probably Northern Italian as well in origin as well. So this all brings us a little closer to trying to understand what was going on. A study from 2020 looked at the handwriting and showed that 5 scribes had worked on producing it. So you can see that they were working on different sections, sometimes collaborating together as well. So every little clue just brings us a bit more to better understanding of the whole thing.
So what was the spark then? What was it that made you think, I've got to write Cryptic? Why do you think that, I mean, in the nicest possible way, Garry, but why do you think the world needed the book on Cryptic? This book?
Well, it's a fascinating subject to me. I mean, I work mainly as a journalist covering archaeology and history these days, and I would find myself kind of coming across these stories about manuscripts, particularly the Voynich manuscript, frequently, and I found it really fascinating. From there, it led me to writing about other mysterious manuscripts too, and so I kind of went from there. It was kind of, it developed out of this interest of just kind of the historical research that was going into it, but also mainly I'm interested in the stories behind the people who made these manuscripts. I'm not a cryptographer myself, but although I write about ciphers and codes a lot in the book, and the manuscripts themselves, what I'm interested in is why people made this, the stories, the life stories of the people who wrote them, and what led them to do this in the first place. Why were these individuals making it? So I'm interested in the people behind these manuscripts, and I thought other people would be interested in this too.
Because that's the thing, isn't it? Because we think, as I said before, in the very badly named Dark Ages, which they weren't, spoiler alert, but people, you tend to think of medieval people of the medieval period, or whatever, how we want to, and we can have a discussion about when the Renaissance actually begins, depends which country you're in, etc. But we tend to think them as two-dimensional. As just thinking, oh, here comes a war, why am I scratching? What's that rat doing over there frothing? And, I'm dead. But it's much more, we find that within these things like this, we find, that strangely enough, they are real, living, breathing people.
Absolutely, yeah. And often, we're quite limited by the information we have about them, but it's things like this, like these manuscripts, that give us insights into who they were, the lives they were living, what interested them, what they found taboo. I mean, what they were trying to hide in cipher, gives it insight into kind of the society around them. And so, yeah, I mean, looking at these manuscripts and the experimentation, people like to be playful with languages and scripts, even from your monks writing and your scriptorians, all the way through to the modern age, as we were just mentioning, Tolkien, etc., and the invention of languages there. People find this fascinating in different periods, and people in the medieval times were just as interested in this as us today. I mentioned I have a chapter in the book dedicated to hoaxes and how people could use mysterious manuscripts to kind of rip people off, because people were fascinated in the past, just as like today, in mysterious manuscripts and solving mysteries and looking at these unusual writings and trying to figure out what this is all about. So yeah, we can see that, a connection between us today and them in the past by looking at all these manuscripts.
The book is called, as you can tell, Garry, I could talk about this in various codes for another hour, but I'm going to run out of time, unfortunately. The book is called Cryptic, From Voynich to the Angel Diaries, the story of the world's mysterious manuscripts. It's by Garry Shaw, who's speaking today. You can, listeners, go on to the TRE bookstore, click on the link, and it'll be winging its way mysteriously to you within 24 hours or so. Garry, if people want to find you online, where can they, and do you have a puzzling, do you have a cryptic Instagram account that is only accessible in, Lithuanian, early Middle Ages Lithuanian backwards?
No, with my social media and website, I've tried to be as clear as possible so people can find it. So uncryptic. My website is GarryJShaw.com, and you can find me under that same name, Garry J. Shaw, on TikTok and on Instagram and on Twitter, even as Garry Shaw Egypt, from my early days writing about ancient Egypt.
Wonderful stuff. Well, listen, Garry, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you. The book is called Cryptic. It's by Garry J. Shaw. Garry, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks.